Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hi, if you're watching us online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the head of studio here at the Pervasive Media Studio. I'm a white man in my 40s with long hair and a beard, wearing a fairly nondescript brown jumper today. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer you the chance to spend some time in our space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially a big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put your hand up? Okay, one or two. Hello, welcome. This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We are a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, UE Bristol and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And what we do is we offer studio space, including desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And most of all, really, we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So just a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. There's a kitchen back there. You can make a cup of tea or coffee, grab a glass of water. We have a quiet space just next to this space. So if things are getting a bit much and you want to take a break, just to my left, that's your right, around the corner there, there's a quiet space. You can pop in there. There's sofas and bean bags, and it's reasonably well soundproofed, at least from in here. You can still hear the street outside. We're not expecting a fire drill today. If you hear a fire alarm, that's probably real. So one of the studio team will direct you to the fire exits, but in any event, they are at the other end of the studio. Again, my left, your right, at either side. Please don't go back through the bar. And then there are accessible toilets and baby change in the corridor over there next to the kitchen, should you need them. There will be Q&A at the end of this talk. So if you're watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Lautem is here. He will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the building, please raise your hand and we'll send around a microphone so that the folks at home can hear what you're saying. You can get news on all of our future talks, and we do actually have a program of future talks up now. We don't always. But you can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, at pmstudiouk.bsky.social on Blue Sky, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. All right. Our speaker for today is Vincent Beidou. Vince is a creative technologist and studio resident. Today he's going to take us on a tour of holographic displays, examining what's already possible today and what remains in the realm of science fiction. And he's going to share insights from his work and his perspective on where the holographic animation industry is likely to head over the next few years. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Vince.
So, yeah, thank you. My name's Vincent Beidou, aka Vince Southbless, aka the Hologram Guy. I've been doing software development for holograms since about 2019. And yeah, this talk is going to be about the displays that I use, displays that I don't use, and yeah, the overall kind of holographic industry where it is at the moment. So when people think about holograms, it conjures up different things for different people. So for some people, a hologram is an image that's generated with no screen, no visible screen. It's kind of projected from somewhere that you're not quite sure where it is. For some people, it's about depth. So it's an image that has depth in a way that a normal screen can't provide. For other people, it's about perspectives and angles and being able to see the image from a completely different angle. For other people, it's about interacting and being able to touch. And for some people, it's more of a kind of like a AI. I should be able to talk to this image and it respond to me. So there's loads of different ways that you can look at it. And if you take that to the nth degree, people end up describing something that it couldn't be distinguished from like a hallucination or a psychedelic experience or something along those sorts of lines. And then you can keep going down that realm to the nth degree, and then you end up in simulation theory and holographic universe and measuring the space between an atom's nucleus and an electron shell. So all of these things are fair, and they're all different ways you can describe it. But actual holography in the way that it's defined and the method is about, okay, so what this is it's recording an interference wave pattern from two cohesive light streams, aka a laser, that you split into two, and then you record an object with one of those laser streams, then the other laser stream you leave uninterrupted, Then you collect them back onto a recording material at the same phase, and you do that by making it an exact divisible of the phase. And then at that point, you have what would be considered a recorded light code, and then you shine a light through that, and then that's what gives you the holographic image. So basically, between that very specific definition of what people say holography is, and everybody's kind of imagination about what a hologram could be, this is where all the inventions come from. So there's a lot of people saying this is a hologram and this isn't a hologram, and it's fair enough, but that's not what this talk is about. This talk is about holographic displays that creative technologists can use, that immersive artists can use, and that scientists who like data visualization. So first, Pepper's Ghost. This is the oldest one. So Pepper's Ghost is the Tupac's performing, the Elvis is performing. There's a Japanese anime, I think it's called Hatsune. She's got blue hair. She's got like at least a 15-year career of like performing, and every single one of those was holographic. If you'd seen any of I'll call them toys, so these are like smaller little contraptions that give a holographic effect. These are all using the Pepper's Ghost effect. So basically the way that it works is primarily it's just about the effect of a 45-degree angle on a piece of material that is semi-transparent. So if you think about a piece of glass that's directly in front of you and that you're looking at the glass, you can see what's behind the glass, but there's also a slight reflection coming back at you. Because you're looking directly at it, there's a bit of the light shining directly back at you. So that's kind of what makes you aware that there's a bit of material there. When you put it at a 45-degree angle, just some of that goes away and just the reflective image is left back, and that's what gives the Pepper's Ghost effect. So this little teddy bear at the bottom, which is half cut off, the reason why that's there is in the real thing, you would want that bear completely out of sight. And that's how the illusion is created. The image is out of sight, but the reflective light still goes all the way up to the top. The 4% that gets sent to you is what you see and is the hologram. And this is completely fictional. And those blue dots there kind of represent what your mind's creating. So your mind is creating that there is an image there. Rotating LEDs. So this is probably the most frequent use of holograms. It's the one that I've seen out in the wild the most. And if you try and like buy a hologram online and go onto like a Temu or an Amazon or something like that and type in hologram, this is probably most likely what you're going to get. So these are the sort of effects that are generated with them. With all of these, there's a bit of a paradox about trying to take a photo or a video of a hologram. So if you've not seen one, this probably isn't doing it as much justice as it can do, but there is this kind of trailing effect with them. There's kind of like your brain does consciously know that it's looking at something that is spinning and rotating, but it still does give an effect that is kind of like illusionary, and there is still some trickery going on. The way that these work is relatively simple in the sense that the three main parts is the LED strip, the motor, and the circuit for timing. So if you imagine as the line of LEDs goes like along the projected surface, the outer LED has got to do a lot more flickering than the inner ones because of the space, the circumference that it's taking. So you just like have a circuit timer, and that's pretty much the whole system is based around this circuit timer giving the precise coordinates and the precise timing for what color and when to flash or not flash. So just by spinning faster than I'm assuming 24 frames a second, a cohesive image is created in the brain, much in the way that general animation works, that the brain is actually filling in the gaps. So this bit I'm calling XR, this is the part where I'm trying to put as many different things into one. So it would probably be better if I called it headsets, but there's multiple things in there. So on the one hand, you have the headsets like that are displayed here where you're wearing something where there is different filters. Maybe they're the same filters on both sides, maybe they're different, but it's actually the screen that you're watching which is generating the holographic effect. So the screen will have images manipulated in a certain way as so that the glasses give you the holographic effect. but then there's also the version where the glasses themselves is where the images are being generated. So then this would be more of the Google Glass, Meta Ray-Bans, and in terms of the contact lenses that might have something on there. So I've bundled them all together, which means there's going to be a lot of disclaimers as we go through, because I'm going to have to describe two different things. So again, in terms of how these work, because there's so many different kind of ways that it does, ultimately it's a personalized image that's going directly to you. So in the mixed reality Meta Ray-Ban Google Glass kind of version, that's by just analyzing exactly where your coordinates are and where your rotation is. And so they're just generating an image on the fly based on, again, minimum 24 frames a second, just calculating what your exact coordinates are. And in the other examples where the actual projected surface is where it's happening, that's about creating what is called a autostereoscopic, which is basically just having an image and having them slightly different. And so in our waking life, the reason why we perceive things as three-dimensional is because our brain can analyze the slight difference between the two eyes that we see. So effectively, it's tricking the brain by making a slight difference in those images. And then, your brain says, oh, this bit must be 3D. So this would be 3D IMAX, 3D cinema, and those sorts of things. Lenticular displays. So these are the displays that I've been using since 2019. And I don't know if anybody remembers, or if you're old enough to remember, back in the day when they used to have these posters and they used to be made out of like tiny little bits of plastic. And if you screen, you could like hear a little zipping noise, kind of look like tiny triangles if you looked at them. That's the lenticular effect. So this is what it looks like. So I've got one of these here. And so this device here, the glass that you can see here is probably about that thick. And so the way that it works is, this is a little bit cropped at the bottom here. So down at the bottom here, it says AB, 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 AB recurring. And so the little half circles that you can see just above, that represents however the technology is guiding exactly where the specific light waves need to go. And so what you have is you have a perspective that when you're standing from one angle, you can only see one set of the filtered light coming through. And so in the examples of these more like the more high-tech version, not just the posters for still images, something that can do programmable, is you'll have a bunch of virtual cameras. Each one of those virtual cameras will get a different perspective. And so rather than it just being AB, AB in a duality, it's about 120 to 140 different versions of the image. So if you imagine 140 different perspectives that get close to a semicircle, and then them effectively creating technologies where each pixel is actually represented by 100 and something different ways that it can direct the light, that gives you 100 or so different perspectives on one screen. And then that's what allows you to feel like you're seeing the same thing from a completely different angle. So with these, you can use softwares that some people might be used to, like Unreal and Unity and Blender. And so when you get the plugins, you'll be looking through your one screen and your one camera like you're used to. But when you create an export, 100 and something virtual cameras will be created on whatever scene you've made. And so then that's how you get a different perspective. So now you have volumetric displays. So a volumetric display is any display where there actually is a physical depth in the light that's being shown. So there are some very simple kind of experiments that people have made with it where they're not actually displays, but if you've ever just seen the kind of, it's like a cube of LED lights and you can kind of just do some like interesting patterns on them. That wouldn't be a display just based on like the pixel density. So if you've only got 25 LED lights, like it would be hard to even make a smiley face. But you take that to the nth degree, and again, you actually can get something which would be considered HD. So this particular version here is using rotating LED lights, but rather than it being face on, it's spinning on its own axis in the middle, giving the LEDs more of a circumference, and then the exact same thing that was happening with the previous ones in terms of the timing. But there are other methods for creating volumetric holographic displays. So some of them involve like very complex procedures of levitating tiny little bits of foam using sound and then projecting light off those bits of foam. And so then again, you can use sound to create a three-dimensional space for where you want your image to be created. And then you can have lights coming in more conventional ways, because it's using the particular sort of foam material, the light that doesn't hit it will just kind of go off and out into the environment. That method is really interesting to see, but again, it's kind of hard to get something that would be considered like HD, and also it's harder to animate it. So to go, if you imagine creating an animation and you literally want to change from one scene to another, it's kind of hard to make that transition because you physically have to move these pieces of foam. But like I said at the beginning, for some people, the definition of a hologram is to be able to have that volume, which is why you've still got people researching it. And so this is the version 1 of a hologram that I'm pretty sure they're on version 3 or 4 at the moment. This was just like the best picture of it. So this is just like a little bit of how it's working, that you'll have something, and so effectively it's a little bit, it's not quite as like drawn in real life, but in reality, this hologram would only be able to span like as far as this is out. And then when you go and break it down, it's just doing a height, width, and depth information in the same way that the other LED was doing a pure X and Y calculation of when it should flash the lights. And then we have wavefront. So wavefront, the people who create this are the ones who are claiming the most that like everybody else's isn't a hologram and this is the real hologram. So this is the picture that they have of it. You can physically go down to their studio and see it, and they've had journalists come and like try it out. This whole thing is like 2 miles underground or something. It was like some very specific use case that they made for it. The claim is that they have screens that are around this big that have over 10 billion pixels on it. So for like a comparison, the Vegas sphere that there is, that huge thing, something that big would have more pixels than what happens there. But the way that they're delivering it is saying that even though it isn't like a direct recording of a light code in the way that real holography is, they're saying that the way that they generate the light is in a similar way, so that it's not just giving you like an individual pixel that is being shone. It's actually saying that they want a piece of, so in this image here, the way that this would be created and the way that they're kind of presenting it is that if the floor was made out of this device and the sides was made out of this device, they could isolate where they want any photon to be individually. So they could say that they want it to appear that there is a red photon if you're standing here, but then if you're standing a little bit further back, that it won't be there. So in terms of all of the holographic technologies, these are the ones which is the most expensive, that the least amount of people have used, but that have the claims that, you know, if it ever did become a viable product, would be the closest thing to actually animated holography rather than just holographic displays like the ones beforehand. So recap, we've got Pepper's Ghost, rotating LED, XR, lenticular, volumetric, and wavefront. So in terms of a linear change in perspective, so this is just to say that there is 1 degree of axis where if you move, the image will actually move in relation to where you are. Pepper's Ghost can't do this, so when you're actually looking at the screen, when you move to the side, because you've got a different perspective of the screen, it doesn't completely destroy the illusion, because it will kind of change physically how big it looks to you. But it's not actually changing the perspective. There's no kind of panoramic effect or anything like that. Similar with the rotating LED. The reason why both of these are considered holographic screens is because you can present an image without kind of highlighting where the background is. So if somebody stands in front of it and they're recorded, you won't see where the background comes from, but there isn't actually a change in perspective. XR, half-half. So in terms of the Google Glass, Meta Glasses version, you can get a different perspective because it is kind of like recording where you are and changing it based on that. When it comes to the screen actually having the images on there, not so much. There is a slight difference. So if you go into a like a 3D movie experience and you kind of move left to right, there is this slight change. But if you were to walk from one end of the cinema to the other end of the cinema, there wouldn't be like a true change in linear perspective. Lenticular, very much so. That's literally what it's based on, is giving you that different perspective. Volumetric, it does as well because the actual LEDs are placed in physical, in real life, so it changes literally based on where you are. And Wavefront claims to be able to do the same as well. So then we've got an orbital change in perspective. So then this is basically, if you're able to do two linear changes in perspective, then that means that you can do more of an orbit, which is like a mix of both the X and the Y, and then possibly the Z as well. So again, Pepper's Ghost is not able to do this for the same reasons as before, but it's even more extreme in this case because as soon as you start getting into trying to look at the orbital, now you're going to start seeing where the light sources is coming from. You're going to be able to see where the original object is, and trying to get like an orbital change in perspective for Pepper's Ghost completely destroys the illusion. Rotating LED as well, you can't get any orbital change in perspective. Now, usually what they do with the rotating LEDs is the animations are usually rotating themselves, and it does end up it does end up delivering the illusion. So even if you're walking around the LED in the wrong perspective, so it's rotating in the opposite direction, or even if it's rotating on its vertical axis and you're moving horizontally, there's something about the animations on it rotating that still will trick your brain into thinking that it's seeing some sort of a three-dimensional object. So it can't do it, and you will really notice it if you're looking at a rotating LED and there's a pause in the animation. That's when you'll really notice how you moving around it isn't really doing anything. Again, with XR, it's a mix because the Google Glass Meta Ray-Ban version is really good at this because it's actually on your face. This is that kind of perspective of like having something on the table and being able to look around it. So actually the Google Glass Meta Glass version of it is really good at the orbital change. But in the other version with the 3D cinema, again, there's just like there's no way of it delivering that. When I was in Japan, I saw it was a 3D dome experience. So it was a dome, so they were projecting on like a half sphere above you, and then you had 3D glasses that went on top of that. And that was I really, really enjoyed that experience, and it was like the best dome projection and the best 3D experience in one. And so it kind of like had you really like looking around you and having things come at you. But even with that experience, you wouldn't be able to actually get an orbital change in experience. So you wouldn't be able to see something on one part of the dome and then move and then it feel like you get like a different angle from it. So there's still amazing things that you can do with them, but it isn't actually giving you any sort of change. So with the lenticular hologram, you can't get an orbital change in perspective on this one because it's only operating through one linear perspective of change. So the holograms that they're developing, usually you just have to decide whether you're going to get a horizontal or a vertical one. So they make them in different sizes and then they make them in different orientations. And also, whichever one you get, you can always just turn it to the side and then program it for that and you'll get that different perspective. But because it's still running on that kind of foundational thing of, again, most of their stuff is behind patents, so I don't know exactly, but it's still about strips of like translucent material that is directing the lights. And so there hasn't been a version that they've created which is like a crisscross, so that you've got one going one way and one going another way. Based on what the conversations I've had with the manufacturers, they're more looking at making different shaped screens. So like if they had like a circular screen, that will give them different effects. But actually in terms of a complete orbital change, it doesn't deliver that. But saying it, there is, if you've got a lenticular holographic screen, which is made for a horizontal display, when you look up and down, there is a slight change. And that slight change is enough to kind of make your brain think it's seeing, oh, there's a different left and right version, and there is like a different kind of top and bottom perspective. But it's not actual to the point where the manufacturers, they don't claim that it has any of that. It's just something when you get it, it is in there, and it's something that can be played with and that has to be accounted for in terms of the eye line of the people that are using it. So, you know, if you're doing something in the public and there are children and adults there, that perspective will kind of alter what you're doing, but ultimately it's not enough to fully like make a project around it having an orbital change. Volumetric orbital change in perspective is what I'd argue is like the best thing about it, that it's like it really is there. So it's that kind of real AR experience of like having something in front of you that you can really walk around. And so this is, again, from what I'm speaking to the manufacturers, it seems like that's why volumetric holograms seem to be going down like a military route, because they're good for submarines, they're good for airplanes in terms of visualizing 3D information in a way that the brain instinctively knows what's going on. And again, wavefronts, they claim to be able to do it. It does seem believable that they would be able to do it, but it's interesting because the wavefront holograms are still just a screen. So yeah, I don't think they're lying, but it would be really interesting to know how it actually works and how it kind of orientates the image in a specific spot. But yeah, all the journalists do account for it happen. So a depth perspective. So Pepper's Ghost doesn't have any depth. This is the reason why when you see it being used, the depth is always the performance space. So you'll have a hologram coming out of somewhere, and whether it's a curtain, whether it's a set, the physical stage always is what's actually presenting the depth. So you have a person, and then you have another real person standing next to them, and then they're in front of like their fake sofa, and it's the orientation to the real person which is making people think like, oh, there's a hologram standing in front of a sofa. But the hologram itself isn't actually capable of giving you a multi-layered, like, this is the background, this is the main subject, this is the foreground. Same with the rotating LEDs. Ultimately, black is not a color, and so when it's rotating, anywhere that you use black then becomes invisible, and so that's the only two options that you have, is color and invisible. So there's not a way to make some sort of like a background. In XR, so in the Meta Google Glass version, you can very much have depth. Some of these things even have like eye tracking on them, so they can actually get into like the real details of like simulating, having like something in the background and simulating depth focus literally based on whether your eye's looking at it. And then also with the 3D cinema version, depth is also created because when you have the overlapping effect, which is making your brain think that it's 3D, if they actually just show the image in a normal way, then your brain, there's ways of making your brain think that something is in the very far back or in the foreground. So with XR, you can do it. With the lenticular displays, you can also do it. So it doesn't actually have anything to do, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't actually have anything to do with the lenticular effect. This is actually more to do with how they develop the software and the post-processing. So a lot in the last couple of years in the new holograms that I've got where the quality is jumped up. I've had to start using that post-processing a lot more. And it's just about how they develop like these blur effects. So this is way more to do with like the artistry of how they develop their software rather than the physicality of how they manufactured the holograms. But they definitely got it to a level where it's one of like the first things that you notice in terms of the difference, sometimes even before the fact that you can change the angle, is like how the depth feels inside of lenticular holograms. So volumetric has depth by its like very creation, how it's made. So there literally is a light which is further away from another light, so they don't need to simulate anything by the time that they've got to that point. And it's going to be the same story with the wavefront the whole way through, except for this one, it makes a little bit more sense how it's created, and so that they can. It seems like their whole technology is based around not just having like a binary on/off for their pixels, and so it's like they actually have a setting to be able to create depth within the pixel. So show this pixel and make it look like it's far away. Show this pixel and make it look like it's close up. So then we have a depth change in perspective. So this is, okay, so you've created the depth, but will that depth actually change based on how far away or how close I am? Pepper's Ghost, no, same reasons as before. Rotating LEDs, no, same reasons as before. XR, yes. This is still actually a bit of a halfway. So the depth change within the Google Glass Meta glasses version, again, is just because it's based on the coordinates. They can literally say, okay, if you go too far forward, literally cut that image off. If you go too far back, make it go blurry. But in the 3D cinema version, not so much. So it does create the depth in like a very visible way, but it won't change based on like which seat that you're sitting in. So the lenticular ones, they don't have this change in perspective, and so what that means is when you're using the lenticular displays, you're coding the depth. So just in the same way that you're like panning a camera and you're tilting the camera, you're saying there's like literally settings on there like depthiness, so you can make it seem like there's more depth to the hologram. You can make it seem like there's less depth to it. But these are all things that you have to program inside of it. These aren't things that are going to change based on whether someone's actually looking far away, looking close at it. So though you can do some really nice depth changing effects, does it actually change based on your perspective? No. So with the volumetric one, this is like a little bit of a halfway, because on the one hand, one of the best things about the volumetric one is that it works with your eye's natural depth perception. So you don't have to code any like shallow depth effects, kind of like f-stop sort of stuff, because your eye will naturally do it. So if there was like like an animal, like a cheetah in front of you, and you go to the front and you look, and with your eyes, you're concentrating on the head, your brain will actually put the rest out of focus in the way that it does happen in real life. But it's not actually changing the depth, and it's a bit of a halfway. So I would argue that it gives the effect in a really artistic way, but whether it's actually changing in the same way that the orbital change is like very definitive and it's the best of. So I might change my mind on that once I play around with it more and say yes that it does, but at the moment I'm leaving that as a halfway. And yes, Wavefront claims it can do everything. So multiple perspectives. So with Pepper's Ghost, like I said with the original linear change, it will feel like you're having a different perspective because depending on how face on you are with the material. But actually, if two people are sitting in two different spaces, they are actually seeing the same thing. There isn't a difference there. Same with the rotating LED, you're not actually seeing anything different. With the XR, it was halfway on this one because if two people are wearing Google glasses or Meta glasses and they look at something, the way that the technology works, they will see a different perspective based on what they're seeing, but they're actually looking at two different screens to be able to get that effect. So for me, that doesn't really count as multiple perspectives, because then I could say, well, let me get two different cinema screens and then have people both watch those and those both be different perspectives. So you can create multi-person experiences with XR where everybody's actually in the same scene, but I would argue that you're not actually seeing multiple perspectives from like a holographic perspective. And the same with the 3D cinema type thing. It doesn't matter where you're sitting in the cinema, you're actually seeing the same thing. But like I said, I kind of do want to test at one point and see how true that is, because it might be that there's a slight difference, and that would still count if it was only slight. So with lenticular, yes, you can definitely get multiple perspectives. If somebody's sitting on the right and somebody's sitting on the left, you literally have to design what you're doing based on that. And if you want something definitely to be seen, you have to have a smaller box of interaction to guarantee that, because people will literally do it, and as they kind of like move around, they'll see different things. So like that's the fun bit about it. And again, with the volumetric, the exact same thing. So you can be sitting on either side and you could be playing some sort of a battleships type game, and you will be seeing a different perspective. And again, that's why the uses that it has is considered so useful, because instinctively, without thinking very hard, you get a kind of sense of placement where something is based on where you're standing. And of course, the wavefront, it can do it. So the last thing is about complete solids. So this is, in the illusion that you're creating, do you have the capability of creating something that can't be seen through? So can you create a complete solid in the image? Again, Pepper's goes no, because the way that it's working is you're only getting a percentage of the light that's coming through, so blacks become invisible. Same with the rotating LED. It can't shine a black light to create like a solid surface. So everything has a level of transparency. And also because it's rotating, if you imagine, it's almost like only a percentage of the time is there something even physically there. So you can always see behind it. XR in the cinema 3D version, yes. In the Google Glass, Meta Glasses version, it's definitely possible, but then I also think by the very nature that you're using glasses and you have to be able to see through the glasses, if it truly got to a point where it was a complete solid, then that would probably be a VR kind of experience that you're going into. So again, there might be some disputes, or there might be something created at the moment where the glasses then give itself a non-transparent kind of like temporary mode to do that. So it would be physically possible, but at the moment I haven't seen anything that does that. Lenticular displays, very much so. So you can, in a lenticular display, you can create a wall, and then you can put something behind that wall, and people will have to look around to be able to actually see it. So you can very much do it in there. Volumetric displays, no, because again, effectively the way that they're creating it, so whether you're using small foam particles or whether you're using the rotating LEDs, if you're using the LEDs, then it's the same reason as before, because it's only being created with the light. And if you're using the particles, you would have to have a complete solid particle to make the solid thing. So if it's being generated from particles, the space between the particles is always going to make it so that it's somewhat transparent. And of course, Wavefront can do it, apparently. So in terms of extra thoughts, there's loads of different things that I kind of could have gone into in this talk, in terms of like the economics of like how the displays are being sold and how it's increasing, and the uses across like gaming, advertising, education, those sorts of things. But I said I was going to try and go to 22, and is this 22?
You can keep going.
Well, yeah. So basically, in terms of the uses, ultimately, I think that education and like the derivatives from it. So there's an entertainment value behind all of these holograms, but in the same way that like a TV screen can be used to educate and used to entertain, is very much like in that realm. The sales of holograms is only increasing every single year, in the same way that VR displays is only increasing every single year. But the price point of the higher end holograms hasn't come down to a level where it's kind of like viable for complete commercial products. So there currently is like a affordable lenticular display. It's small, kind of mobile phone sized. So in terms of the adoption of holograms, it's constantly increasing and it's constantly moving in the direction of mainstream adoption. But in terms of its particular breakout use case, that's still yet to be found. So some of the manufacturers are going down a sort of memory capturing, so what is it called, like Gaussian splatting, if anybody's heard of that. So this is ways now that you can, with a very relatively low amount of data, so I could come into this room and maybe record around 15 seconds of this room, and you can develop a three-dimensional version of the whole. So that's one angle that people are saying is like, okay, rather than taking normal photos, now every time you go somewhere, if you take a 15-second video, you'll be able to save the whole memory in holographics, which at first seemed a bit gimmicky to me, but when I bought it, it was like, this is cooler than I thought it would be. Like if I was born now and this is the only thing that I knew, it would be pretty interesting. Some of the others are going down a gaming route. So there's applications being developed and kind of slightly open sourcey ways that people are kind of like developing games and multiplayer games inside of it, which I've done a few of those, and when I brought them into spaces, they always garner a lot of attention. They always kind of like capture people's imaginations in certain ways, young people, old people. So I personally feel that gaming is going to be the route that all the other things kind of branch out from. But I've also used them in educational scenarios. And whether it's because they're still novel and it's like a novelty at the moment, it seems like a very, it's like quite frictionless, just in the sense that it in and of itself is still quite interesting. So you can put information in there that maybe the subjects aren't as interesting, and you can kind of make them alive, just like taking something from text and making it a video about it. This just gives it that extra dimension. A lot of the ways that I've been interacting with the holograms, I've been using hand tracking, I've been using haptics. So that's another thing that a lot of people in the manufacturing side are concentrating on, are like novel controllers. So ways that you can interact with the hologram, making them novel, and then that maybe being the way that the hologram breaks out. So maybe it's not actually the displays that become the thing, but maybe it's a voice operated like home AI that the hologram's just the face off, and it's more about developing a like the voice controller. So actually Alexa, it kind of got itself to a certain level, then trying to put it into the phone, but maybe it's more about the holographic displays being the visuals for another completely different way of controlling it. So what I hope that people got from the talk is just one, when people are like having the debates about whether this is a hologram or not, hopefully it's just like a resource for you to describe like whether you care about what they're talking about or not. Like, is it going to serve your purpose? And so hopefully you can find like the specific purposes. And also hopefully for the people who did know about holographic displays beforehand, maybe there was one on there that you didn't know about that you can kind of go and research. And if you find out anything interesting, please send it to me as well. So thank you very much for being on talk. And that was everything.
Thank you very much, Vince. Do we have any questions? Oh, right up there.
Hi, thanks for a great talk.
Thank you.
With wavefront holography, how do you animate it?
It's designed to still just be working with like Blender and Unity and all of those kind of things. So effectively, it's it seems like it's just like a screen that has pixels at like different depths. And so it's still just being controlled by like this pixel, this color now, this pixel, this color now. And then you would animate it in the normal way of like having like an array of, okay, this is the image now, this is the image now, and getting it to more than 24 frames a second.
Okay. I thought that you basically created an interference pattern using a 2D surface. Is that right?
Well, so that's that's what actual holography is.
Yes.
So that's what that is. So that's kind of like why wavefront can't really be what it's saying, because it wouldn't actually be a single surface that's like morphing the like light code on the inside. But the claim is that because there's so many pixels in there, it's still going to be able to manipulate the light enough to, so like as humans, we're only perceiving like a certain amount of light when we're looking at the real holography. And so it's just claiming you're going to see the same amount of light. So like on the actual cellular level, it won't be the same, but from the human perspective, they're saying it will be the same to like the human eye.
Right, so you're not manipulating the surface?
No.
As such?
But you're manipulating so many pixels.
Yeah.
That it like changes it from your brain's perspective. Again, I've not used it, and it's not like a thing where you go online and like loads of people have used it. Like when you go and research it online, it's like 5 people have had access to it, and the guy who's created it went to the last South by Southwest, and the interviewer was very much like, yeah, this would have been better if you brought one here and everyone could see it, and they didn't, you know, like so.
Thank you. Hi, yeah, great talk. Thank you.
It is on. It's only for the folks at home, though.
I was just wanted to think of the Star Trek holodeck.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the wavelength is kind of more. Is that what they're sort of trying to do?
Yeah. So the wavefront would be the wavefront would very much be that, but it's like even if that worked, you would then get into the scenario. That's why I kind of mentioned like the holographic universe and stuff, because then you would be in this thing and then you would see it, but then you wouldn't be able to touch anything. Somehow you would then have to start like creating physical haptics things that feel exactly like the thing that you're touching. And so without that, I would wonder what, say, a room full of lenticular displays might feel just as holodecky as the wavefront in the end.
I went to In Pursuit of Repetitive Beats.
I don't know that one.
Seen that?
No,
I think
no,
it's
no.
still going. It's incredible, like VR. It's all about coming from like the rave scene in Birmingham.
Is that in Bristol, was it?
It was. I saw it in Birmingham. It's
Okay.
gone around London, but it's. Yeah, I can message you what it is. But that was like VR, feeling things, following through rooms and kind of having different perspectives. So I think I don't really know where that lies, and I guess the XR.
Yeah. So when you were, how did you move safely with VR on?
They had grids come up to stop you going into certain bits.
Yeah. So the XR experience would be able to create something similar, but then obviously if you were doing the XR, then you'd have to spend loads of money on the set. Because I'm assuming, did you ever take it off to see where you were?
Yeah.
Okay. So what did it look like physically? What was in front of you?
It was like black and like neon strips and like a kind of grid. It was
Okay.
It was really cool. If it's still on, definitely.
I mean,
like it.
Yeah. I'd definitely like try something like that. And I think that you would be able to do something similar with XR, but then that's like way more immersive.
Yeah.
And then like you're suggesting, if you had like a wavefront, that would definitely do that. But then also, because I'm like slowly using bigger and bigger lenticular screens, like I just wonder, even though they're only doing one line, if you had a room full of them, how that would trick your brain. Because I think it probably would just trick your brain in thinking, oh, I'm surrounded by this thing.
Yeah.
I think it would work.
Oh, so good. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Hi, really good talk, firstly. It was very fun. I'm interested by holograms. Like, I'm a massive Star Wars fan growing up.
Yeah.
And it's like, in the Clone Wars, they always have the guys doing the meetings.
Oh, yeah.
But I was just wondering, you kept mentioning with the 24 frames per second.
Yeah.
Is that like in our brains that it has to be quicker than that for us to make it look 3D?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, just the basic like, not to make it look 3D, to make it animate. So that's how your brain's connecting the different scenes that it scenes along. So it's not actually for the 3D perspective, which is why the whole thing about going from holography to holographic displays, because holography is a still image and it kind of just like really works perfectly. But trying to get that to animate, there's been different ways. So they've tried to get actual holographic slates and then animate it in the same way that you do a normal animation. But they're so big that you can only do like a few seconds at a time, as opposed to like what you might be suggesting, like, okay, we've got live cameras and now we just like want the holographic thing to appear. So that would be way more about, be like the quality of the experience. So you could get something that was like going at 6 frames a second, and depending on what it is, it might still look quite cool. But say for like a communication, it would just lead to the same frustrations to like when you're trying to talk to somebody and it's cutting out. So the frames is purely about the animation, not necessarily about the 3D-ness.
Cool, thank you.
Anybody else in the room? Oh, Carl, go on.
On your matrix, you had 2 rows. One was orbital perspective and the other was multiple perspectives.
Yes.
What's the difference?
Well, so that's kind of like where it came down to the XR example, because with the XRs you can very much like walk around, but you can't. If 2 people look at that screen, they'll still be seeing the same thing. So with the lenticular, you can see it from a different angle, but 2 people simultaneously can have that same experience. Whereas with XR, you both have to have separate screens to both be able to go around and orbit it. So yeah, and then that's the difference with the orbital and the linear one, is that like actually, if you only wanted to do horizontal, then linear and orbital would be the same thing. But orbital just means, okay, if you've got 2 of them at the same time and I can go left and I can go up, that means I can go left up and kind of go and get that perspective. So the lenticular one can do 2 multiple, but it can't actually do orbital because you can't go up and can't go around. But because you can do linear, that's kind of going back to what you're saying. Because it can be linear, well, if I stand at the beginning and you stand at the end, we're both seeing something slightly different. So that's kind of part of, this is the reason why it was like really great to make this talk, because they're such different technologies, they don't actually fit like comfortably into categorizing them very easily, because they're all doing such different things. So that's why I was like, oh, actually, let me try and do it. And there will be flaws, and hopefully like when the YouTube video comes out, some people can actually point out some specific ones and say, actually, this one is a little bit more concrete, or I've got a wavefront in my house and this is how it kind of works. But yeah, like it is a little bit of a trying to fit the pieces together where they don't necessarily overlap. And I am sure there are going to be better ways of like describing it and making it more clear. But the interesting thing about it for me is it wasn't like clear, like this one can do it all because it's better and this one can't. It is like, this one can do that and this one can do this aspect of it.
We've got one question down the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to, about costs. Like a whole room full of lenticular screens. How expensive would that be? I mean,
a whole room full of lenticular is 6 digits, so it's like hundreds of thousands. But it's not, it wouldn't be $1 million though. I think I could do that for like a room, like 400,000, something like that. So yeah, but it's kind of weird because it's just capitalism. So it's like maybe if they got popular, because they have managed to make some affordable screens, maybe if they got popular, you would be able to do it. But then maybe they've only made those screens affordable because they need to bring people inside of it, and maybe they're actually making a loss on that sort of stuff. And because with every single different holographic manufacturers, they're so about like their patents that they've got. So however they figured it out, it means that another person can't iterate on that like innovation and just make it better. So it's like a very much stuck in the capitalist point of it, where I don't know if they're I don't know if they're really bumping up their profit margins and they're like a lot cheaper, or if they're making a loss. But like, yeah, the lenticular ones are like, they cost thousands of pounds for each of them. And so to do a room full of that is going to get into hundreds of thousands. But say with the wavefront, when he was posed with that question, it was like, this one, this big, is hundreds of thousands. And so the displays he's trying to sell are like millions to other people. But either way, they are getting cheaper. And they are getting, so it's like every time they release a new one, the new one is better and cheaper than the ones beforehand. It's kind of going down that route. And it's like, I'd say it's like a 8-year, 9-year of like holographic displays. So maybe by the time we get to 20, they'll be affordable, but who knows?
Any last questions for the room before we wrap up? In that case, we'll say thank you to Vince.
Thank you.
All right, before you all go, if you want to stick around in Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, then please come find one of the studio team. Right now, that's myself and Loughton. There's other people here, but they've all gone to lunch. If you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.